Hello, everyone. I'm Lydia Malama Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of APAD and the Photography Show. Welcome to our 45th edition. I'm thrilled to welcome you and open today's program with this really dynamic panel about the possibilities of sculpture in photography and sculptural photography itself, bringing photography off of the two-dimensional plane in various ways and how that can help illuminate the narratives within. I'm going to hand it over now to Stephen Frailey of Dear Dave, our frequent collaborator. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Ron, Lou, and Fabiola, thank you for joining us today, and enjoy this lovely conversation.
I see you.
Lydia, thank you very much, and I want to thank all the people here at APAD who do such a remarkable job, and Irene as well, and for making this increasingly a place that one wants to be if you're interested at all in contemporary photography. Thank you all for being here. It gives me great pleasure to first introduce our terrific panel this morning. Starting from the far position, please greet Lou Peralta. She has had several solo exhibitions at the Kozlov Larson Gallery in Houston and the Obscura Gallery in Santa Fe, and her work is also represented here at APAD at the Obscura Gallery. The work has been included in exhibitions at the Blue Sky Gallery, Klompchain Gallery, the Houston Center for Photography, and the Arles Festival. She is based in Mexico City. Next to Lou is Ron Norsworthy. Ron is an artist and a designer and is represented by the Edwin Houck Gallery in New York. His work has been shown at the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Newark Museum of Art, and the Cummings Art Center at Connecticut College in New London. He was a fellow at the glorious McDowell Colony in 2023.
As were you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hello, fellow.
Hi. Was my name on your panel?
I did a
On
little
your
research.
panel?
No, I just did research. That's
Yeah,
Okay.
readily available information.
And lastly, to my immediate right, Fabiola Menchelli is represented here at APAD by Marshall Gallery from Los Angeles. She has had a recent solo exhibition at the Norton Museum in Palm Beach, and the work has been included in Bomb Magazine, Aperture, and Osmos. Fabiola has been a resident at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, and she too is based in Mexico City.
Yeah.
So I think next year we should just go to Mexico City.
Please.
You know?
Yeah, you should come.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
Okay, it's a deal.
Perfect.
Lou, I believe that you are first. Would you like to take
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Let me put the first slide. When I was born in the 60s, my mother gave birth to me, and immediately she went back to my father's photographic studio because she was the manager. And she also developed new products, boxes, albums, papers. I'm telling this because this is where I come from. And I grew up with cameras, lights, flashes. And by the age of 6, I was already holding sun reflectors to light brights. And so I think I saw all the changes of the times, from tungsten to lights, video, holograms, color photography, and, well, lots of changes. At 17, I came to the United States to study photo retouching. And then I was the photo retoucher of the studio. And then I studied graphic design because I wanted to be an artist. But the art scene is not what we are seeing now. In fact, hardly photography was considered an art. So I decided to be an editorial photographer. I traveled, I made photo essays, and I also made portraits for famous people in magazines. So 30 years went by, and after I was working as the photographer of the National Opera in Mexico, and I realized I was missing something, that I needed the pictures to be more. I want the pictures to have volume. I also wanted to know who I was and what does it mean to come from a family that have dedicated to photography for more than 100 years. So after 9 years ago, after a life limit experience, I decided to fully dedicate myself to my artistic practice. In an initial stage, I asked myself one simple question: what is inside a portrait? And like when you want to understand how does a radio or a computer works, I took apart the portrait. My metaphor was to cut in stripes the printed image and disassemble it and then weave it again together. So during this process, I understood one thing, that we are not static. Like when we see ourselves reflecting in running water, we are never static. We are constantly moving, shifting, and evolving. We are like perfect machines creating moments in our lives. And here is where my piece, where my image started to leave the wall and to go beyond the frame and to split out, no, to overflow. And here is where I started to work in an interdisciplinary way. I started my research turned to art and science, and I became interested in quantum physics and string theory, which suggests that in a deepest level, we are only energy. This led me to think, could it be that when we create a portrait, are we capturing energy? And maybe if we're capturing energy, maybe we are invisible. So this is my work continue, and I created this loom to make my new series, my Portraits of the Invisible or Portraits of Energy, with hundreds of nails to be able to weave copper, who is the best conductor of energy. And so I started with one of the portraits of my grandfather, who was a photographer taking portraits of stars from the golden cinema era in Mexico. And then I made my own contemporary version. And then I made these photo sculptures, which are the feeling and perception I had when portraying the person evoked as an energetic structure. And then I became interested in the past. I wanted to know, how do we portray ourselves as Mexicans in the pre-Hispanic era? So I went to review codices, and then especially the Mendocino Codex. And I found out that we are using the same objects like the comal or griddle, the same way we are using them 5 years ago. 5 years ago, no, 500 years ago. And so this is my work from my most recent series, where I fusion the vision of architect Luis Barragan with contemporary portraiture. I feel that Barragan painted with light, mostly like photographers do. He used windows and shutters to control light, to transform spaces in his emotional architecture. And this, for example, in this same series is a collage where I interpret the iconic figure of the Mona Lisa, connecting the legacy of European Renaissance to contemporary portraiture with different media and materials. And this is where my pieces started to expand. They become more material and they become space. And in this series, for example, I explore the idea that proposes string theory, that of the hidden dimensions. No? And here is also one of my most recent series, where the picture becomes a loom, where light, shadow, and matter starts to intertwine. And for me, the image functions like a loom, reclaiming the handmade as a gesture of resistance. Nowadays, I am in an artistic residence in May, exploring with a perspective that the picture overflows in Mexico City in the ANT project residency. Thank you very much.
Lou, I think it's really informative. I believe when one first looks at your work, when one first comprehends it, the history of a craft tradition is really in the foreground. But I think it's really meaningful for you to talk about the sort of dematerialization of the portrait. It seems like one of the things that you're really interested in is, in fact, subverting the photograph, so it no longer is something that is held, but something that is diffuse.
You know, Stephen, in my house, the conversation was photography. There was no line between photography and life, no? And so after seeing photography bidimensional all my life, that's how I wanted the pictures to be more. And my way, I think the easiest way, many photographers are doing many things. Here at the first, we can see they are sewing, they are making like collages, working with light. I think what we do responds to our era, like in the German word, the zeitgeist, no? I think we are really, well, we will let that to art critics and historians to do, but I think we are responding to our times. So I think I need that photography tells that story. When they review our work in a few decades, maybe they find we are responding to these convulsion times, these difficult times, no? And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, trying to reflect this movement, this historic era. No?
Do you have any plans on taking this even further in terms of, again, just thinking of the idea that a photograph becomes a concrete idea, and it seems like part of your agenda, part of your motive is to diffuse that?
Yes, I think what I want, my desire in photography is to innovate and do new things. I'm going into installation, always photography-based. And for example, I went yesterday to the MoMA. There is an exhibition in the lobby that is free, you don't need a ticket. And there is an artist working, his work is selecting works of art from the museum archive, and it's also photographic. You see, everything is open to innovation. Iñaki Bonillas is working with concepts, and it's photographic. We do not have anymore to work exactly with only photograph, to use photography in new and innovative ways.
Of course, no? Yeah. You know, one of the pleasures of seeing the work at APAD and also hosting the panel is just that it reinforces the idea that there are so many tools and so many different gestures and so many different procedures that one can now engage with in photography. And I think just to finish this, I think in my opinion, there's a tendency in your work to, again, if not destroy the photograph, at least enlarge the photograph and take it away from its substrata. And it's almost as if it should really be just a projection. So it's just light and image, and there's no surface.
Yeah. Just one more thing. What I want to do is make a conclusion for 4 generations of a family that had dedicated to photography. So that is what I'm heading. I will try to push as much as I can in my lifetime to be able to make innovative way for photography. That's my goal. You know? And to expand and to, maybe we don't know what's in the future, but we're getting in, right? Yeah. With light, with different materials, with dimensions, no?
Right. Yeah.
So that's
that's
exactly.
We don't know what we're
It's
doing
because
until-
I research your work, your book.
I think we can all support your agenda. We can all
100%.
collaborate in a way with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ron, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I am Ron Norsworthy, and I thought a great way to kind of introduce you to my work and my practice is to show this little video that is in my studio that shows something that's not easy to capture on Instagram and social media. So I am an artist who uses photography to make collages in relief. They are photos applied to plywood layers, and those plywood layers are applied to themselves. So, and I am kind of really excited about how our world, visual world in which we live, especially historically, culturally, how we use objects and spaces and the population of those spaces with objects and decor, how we engage with that. So the kind of the negotiation of ourselves through the objects that are in our lives. So, like Lou, I also think that artists use the times that we're living in to kind of engage authentically and use our practice and what we're making to make sense out of things. And I think that we are overloaded with a dearth of images, and for me, they come from all different spaces. And that my work uses the photograph or the extracted photograph from its context as material, sort of like paint. And that is turned into collages, which in turn are turned into these sort of scenes. People have said dioramas, people have said tableau, shadow boxes. It just breaks through the picture plane. And the, let's see. So this first image is pretty representative of my work. I'm a former set designer, by the way. I think that's important to say. I think you can probably see that. I am fascinated with domestic scenes, and not necessarily the scenes where something dramatic happens. I think that with the figures and in the spaces that they populate, there's some interior something happening. Not quite sure what the folks are thinking, and not quite sure that they are even aware that there's somebody else in the space. Sometimes they are in their own worlds, but yet they are in these worlds. And there's also a duality that one can find in the work. So there, in my visual language, you are going to find sort of a domesticity, interior, exterior spaces, but even in this exterior space, that background may just be a backdrop. That might be a soundstage, for instance. So my compositions are a way of talking about the constructions of the tropes in which we live. This body of work is my latest series. This is pieces from my latest series, which is called American Dream. Emphasis on dream. I'm the American that's doing the dreaming. So it's a kind of contemplation of this idea of the American dream and what it might represent for some of us. You can see, if you look through the doorway, there is a stage flat. And then there's a kite that's being flown. So even though I think initially it's legible as a scene, there are things going on that are left for the viewer to figure out the pieces of the story. In this scene, we have this composition, we have a little boy and a dog on a table and Black Jesus from the show Good Times. I think it was the first or second episode. And my work doesn't often have a narrative, but this one kind of has a narrative fragment. So I made this piece last spring, almost a year ago, when our new Pope was being announced. And I imagined him, the piece is called Dalton, 1965. And the piece is sort of a secular annunciation. It's the Pope as a 10-year-old being told by God, represented by a dog, that he will be Pope one day. I thought it was an interesting iteration of maybe an American dream. In this piece, it's called More or Less. I take my images from all over the place. There's no hierarchy. There's no sort of this is precious and this is not precious or less precious. I am equal. And they're literally tools, so they're pigments that I use to create my compositions. The figure in the foreground is Diana Ross, and the figure in the background is Billy D. Williams, from different scenes in the film, 1975 film Mahogany. It's about a woman who wants to be a fashion designer. She becomes a famous model in Italy, but in typical 70s patriarchy fashion, she has to make a choice between love and her career. So she comes back to Chicago and chooses love. So this scene sort of imagines what their life might be after they get back together. I'm not sure it's great. But the space is fantastic, I think. Something that shows up also in my work is strange architecture, unstable. We have stairways that go places, walls tilt, ceilings invert, scenes in the back, windows don't match, architecture is sort of incongruent. There's an instability to it that sort of might match. I guess I'm trying to get at a kind of psychology of architecture, a kind of poetics of our choreography within the spaces in which we navigate and inhabit. And especially as a Black person growing up in the 70s, I was also born in the 60s.
Bravo.
I think that there's not maybe much representation of what the Black middle class or upper middle class, what that experience is like, and the idea of performance, the idea of assimilation, the idea of code switching. All of that, I think, is legible in the work when you start to spend time with it. This piece is also from the American Dream series. It's called Performance. And we have, this really kind of shows something that I do in the work with the figures, and that is sort of move them off of themselves. So something that frustrated me about, I came to New York in the 90s with this idea that I was going to be a painter. And but then a need to make money and have resources to take care of myself led me into set design. And then I became kind of really good at that and was stuck there for a while. But the reason that set design was compelling to me was how there was movement, how pictures could move in film. And I wanted to recreate that in my paintings and didn't quite know how. But then in these compositions, many, many years later, I found that I could use drifting the figures off of each other, moving the layers slightly off to indicate movement, but also to talk about this idea of W.E.B. Du Bois spoke about double consciousness for Black artists, but I think it's for all artists. I think it's for all people. This idea that we are not the same person in any given time. We might, I might, in certain spaces where I feel safe, I might turn up the fact that I'm queer. I might dial into that, or I might dial into Black. I might dial into my age or my class or education. We have all of these different identities. So I think the static image, for me, prevents or obscures a kind of authenticity that I want to convey in my work. So we have movement here. So I use, what's interesting here in this piece that I think is kind of cool is the fact that the grass is a photograph. It's a photograph of our lawn. And then the background is a Grant Wood painting called Young Corn. and the way that those can exist within my work. I use paintings, I use advertising photos, I use stills from films to compose my works. I use Zillow real estate photography also. So in this piece, this is sort of an homage. This is called Trying to Remember the Future. And it really shows all the different kinds of photography that I incorporate into my collages. So we have a gazing ball that is on the table. That is a selfie taken with my iPhone. You can see a little yellow in the center. That's my phone. And then behind that is a family photo. That's my grandmother as a toddler. The lilies are from our garden in Connecticut. The clock and the furniture and the mirror frame are First Dibs ads, so they're product shots. And then, most interesting is the background, which is a wallpaper that I designed in 2004, and it is photo-based. It uses the photography of the great photographer Nancy Serkis. And she did a photo essay of a black family called One Family in 1971. And you can see the boys drinking out of, there's a reference photo. That's where I started. And then you see in the wallpaper a repeating toile of the little boy in the toilet and the bathroom sink. I thought there was something incredibly charming about that image that I wanted to capture. And I think the way that photography, for me, can be sort of transformed into literal decoration, which is the backdrop in this image, is compelling for me. This piece is from a series called I, Narcissus. It's an examination, it's a reinterpretation, a reimagining of the Narcissus myth and a contemplation on self-love. So we've got jewelry filling a vase. This piece is called Vanitas. It's based on the Dutch Vanitas paintings, this piece is named Vanitas Self-Portrait as a Goldfish in a Vase. So it is me thinking about how, as a black queer man, I have been objectified and tokenized. So I can actually see myself as this goldfish, black goldfish in a fishbowl, and as a Greek vase painting also. So if you look really closely, I'm actually holding a cell phone and looking at myself in the cell phone. And it's a little surreal too. I've got, like the previous piece, the butterflies become flowers in a vase. And here you really get a sense of the dimensionality. Something that I think that was particularly successful is the transparency and the illusion of transparency. So in my work, I get to play with the idea of illusion, and the fishbowl is really cool to me in this piece. This is I, Narcissus. This is Narcissus in Rollers, another piece. So we've got this really cool kid who's a friend of mine, who let me use his image that he took from Instagram. He's wearing an Hermes scarf, and the flowers have come out of the vase now onto a brooch on his chest, and he is reflected infinitely in his sunglasses. This is another. All of my Narcissuses in the 11 pieces in this series are different iterations of Narcissus. They look different in each time. So this is Narcissus looking at a painting probably of himself. And then a mirror. There's always mirrors or some kind of reflection. Another Narcissus who is, this is Narcissus Can't Look. He can't bear to look at the negative reflection of himself. It's literally a negative.
Right.
And this is Narcissus in Echo. This Narcissus is at a dressing table, and Naomi Watts, who played Babe Paley in Truman Capote's The Swans, I think last year that came out, or the year before. And she's gazing back at him. So in my work, the mirrors don't always reflect back the figure. And then Echo is behind the open door, kind of gazing at him. So just a modern interpretation of Narcissus. These last works that I'm going to share with you are from a series called The Folks That Live on the Hill. And I live in Roxbury, Connecticut, my husband and I. And when we were closing on our house, we learned that the writer Ralph Ellison, who wrote Invisible Man, and his wife tried to purchase a house in Roxbury, and because of anti-black racism, were not shown any property in Roxbury. Despite their very best friends, Rose and William Styron, recommending their realtor and knowing for sure that there was property available. And it ruined the relationship between the Styrons and the Ellisons. But this is a sort of Afrofuturist. The series is an Afrofuturist take on kind of going back in the future, and it's a corrective narrative. So these 4 works represent the Ellisons in the house that they should have been able to buy. This work is entitled Poolside, and parenthetical title, They Can't Bother Us Today. So you've got a white man mowing the lawn in the background, and a doll that belongs to that's a plaything for their dog. This piece is, I also included this work so that you could kind of understand the dimensionalities. So if you look, these aren't framed, or it was photographed, they were photographed before they were framed. You can really see how the layers build on each other. This piece is entitled Sold. We had to deal with what has passed. And it's a for sale sign, and Fanny Ellison is going through some photos. Ralph Ellison was also a photographer, very accomplished. So I was able to use photographs that he took of himself and of his wife as their images. So there's actually his work within these works. My work is also allegorical, so things represent other things, symbolize other things. The painting is the Mayflower coming to America for the first time. So there's something kind of poignant, I think, about that. And this final piece from the series that I'll share is called Open Door. Is This All There Is? And it is Fanny, and her reflection is the actual photograph that Ralph took of her, but she's sort of in deep contemplation on the bed, and he's just taken a shower, on his way to take a shower in the bathroom through the threshold. There's always thresholds. There's always other spaces that are implied or a little bit on view. Something that I think is interesting about this work for me is the sort of chandelier and the way that it sort of spotlights a space that hasn't been occupied. And this last work is actually in my gallery's booth, and it is a study. I wanted to kind of show a little bit of my process. So before anything before any wood gets cut out in layers, before any of that, there are these studies that I do where I take the composition, and which is a digital collage, and I color block. I outline the shapes, and I assign colors to them to understand what things are going to occupy which layers. And then I lay over bits of the photograph to kind of negotiate with the composition what it wants to say, how it wants to be. So I thought I'd end with this and share with you a little bit about how I'm hoping to kind of complicate our relationship with space and the things around us and how they shape us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Your work reinforces the idea that collage historically at different times has been a political idea, has been ideological, and and I think you're continuing that tradition, and also it's very experimental in terms of genre of collage. But I also want to ask you a little something outside of the idea of the photograph as a three-dimensional entity. I'm really struck by the melodrama in
Oh, there's
your
drama
work.
for sure.
Yeah, but it's
has to be.
it's melodrama, and
Yeah.
it reminds me. I'm a big fan of lifestyle photography. I'm a big fan of advertising. The work reminds me of a particular tradition of advertising and soap opera, and Douglas Sirk, the filmmaker.
One of my favorite, one of my
Okay.
absolute favorite filmmakers,
Well,
referenced a lot in
Yeah.
my work. So I will say that as a little queer black boy growing up in Iowa, I retreated into movies and television and cartoons, and I think that that's obvious. I was able to perhaps have more control of my world in my imagination and in my creativity. And for a child, I don't think we understand these categories and genres that feel and have always felt a little arbitrary to me, who's determining those things. And so I think that the drama is drama that I was experiencing, but also drama that I was drawn to because my life in Iowa felt not as big as I would have wanted it to be. And so I think that being able to escape into filmmaking, there's no question that I was drawn to music videos and the creativity there.
But it's
to
also,
explore.
again, it's a lavish sort of leisure class, aspirational.
1,000%. It's aspirational, and I think that that's sort of Mad Men, but also like through a distinctly black lens, right? And because I think that there's an authenticity, and there's no question that working plywood is the métier of a set designer. And all the models, before 3D models, before we had the technology, we built our set models. And playing with those, playing with Legos before that, I think that the idea of creating space and then figures that you moved around inside of those spaces, I think is play that we have all engaged at and engaged in. And I think that with the melodrama, there's also this, something that there wasn't time to really talk about, but I believe there's this field of philosophy called speculative realism, triple O theory. And, we always say, and I'll make this very simple, I'm drawn to this sweater because I love the sweater. Triple O theory, which is object-oriented ontology, inverts that. So the sweater's drawn to me. And so the way that my compositions are made, and I think that that's such a delightful, kind of fun way of thinking about this world that we occupy, that objects exist outside of our knowing. They have a beingness that is outside of anything that we could know. And the universe is a thing. It's a thing, it's not a human. And that there's this organization within the universe. And so to do this choreography with my work, where it's maybe telling me what it wants, how I can say, this is the story, I want to make this thing about the Pope as a 10-year-old, but it is choosing how that scene is going to play out. And I just like the ability to be able to create these worlds or universes in dimension.
Okay. And this is a great segue, creating universes
Sure.
and worlds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's so many things that I've been thinking while the three of you been having a conversation, and I'm like, don't make noises. But so I'm gonna start here because it's a big reference, and while it's like going way, way back in time, it's important that we recognize that the knowledge comes, to me, ideas are part of the universe, if you want. And we are able to tap in on them, and come on, if we're ready to process them, then they materialize, no? So in the same way, instead of objects being, thinking that if we start researching something, ideas become almost like materiality. They pull weight. Anything that has weight in the universe starts spinning.
Yeah.
And if anything that spins pulls all the resources around, right? So the thing that's been in the center of my research for a very long time is optics and the way in which our body perceives the world. And this is one of the first recorded, one of the first records of humanity thinking about optics, thinking about the body, thinking about the ways in which perception works. Also, he was the first person to record a camera obscura, which in a way is the same as our bodies and our eyes, right? We discovered the camera obscura as a humanity around this time, and it wasn't until later that we discovered how to fix images into on a piece of paper through salts and chemistry and all that photography is today. But this is a big influence. The other side of my influence is architecture
Let's see the next slide.
and spaces. This is a picture I made a really long time ago that I still adore. I was making constructions in the studio for the camera to be photographed, and I used a prism like Newton. The fun fact about prisms is like, sure, you can diffract light through the prism, like a ray of white light will make the rainbow, but the rainbow will also become a white ray of light again if you use a second prism. And this idea of things opening and closing becomes really important just to start you on the work. In 2020, when the world kind of closed, I was lucky enough to be living in an apartment where I had a room that I turned into a darkroom. And I've been thinking about working with color. I've been doing camera-less photography for a really long time, always kind of in black and white because it was the materials that I had access to. And I started trying to figure out how to use this process, which is complicated and dangerous and risky in many ways, and teaching myself how to do it in a way that I could protect my body, but I also could find new ways, or the process could teach me new ways of looking. Turns out when I started making this work, and these are the test strips for the color that I can use in the darkroom, I discovered that the paper actually becomes exposed to the red sexy light of the darkroom, the safe light. So I shut the light out, I turned the light off, and I started working blind in order to protect the paper from turning green. And this led to thinking about the image with my body as a choreography of movements that weren't as obsessive about perfection and about reality as it was important to fuel the image through the folds, right? So I started making these folds. This is an 8x10 piece of paper because I started working small to figure out how to work in these conditions. I work in complete darkness with very risky chemistry, and I wear a very uncomfortable hazmat suit that I did not bring a picture of. But anyways, the thing about the folds were not only that finally the pictures had all this space that they were como pushing on the world. Before I was making kind of pictures that cognitively created a space that you could, in your imagination, inhabit, right? Like I would construct the space for the camera. In this case, the space was being constructed in the real world in a way. So eventually I started thinking about mounting these objects. First with paper, which is like just the things that we played with when we were childs, and like this is easily accessible things. And then I had the opportunity to do a show in Portland where I had access to a very intense fabrication process, which included folding metal plates to the exact angles of the prints and then creating these supports that were exactly the objecthood of it. No? So you can see the front and the side thing. This became really important because the to me, photography is always three-dimensional. It's always an object. It's just that that third dimension is so thin that we forget about it, and we fall into the window of whatever we're looking at, right?
Illusion,
like your
yeah.
phone or pictures on the wall or on the TV or whatever. You fall for the optic. When you receive information through the eyes, it's one of the senses that's so closely connected to the brain that it brings you up really quickly, right? And the body of the image, in this case, because it was sculptural and you had to move around it, there was something about the presence of the spectator that you have to reckon with another object, with another body, and you have to move around it that makes you become also present of your experience in the world, right? Instead of being locked up on your phone or wherever we do. Okay, so I did that show. It was great. I eventually decided to go back to using archival materials like paper and museum board and other things to mount the images because specifically I wanted to, it was really hard to conserve these objects in the world. The world is cruel to art in some ways, and so I wanted to protect it with a frame. So I started thinking about the object of the frame as something that came out of the piece, and therefore the color of the frame kind of comes, I pull it from the piece, and I work really closely with my frame shop to create these incredible, beautiful backgrounds, and then the pieces, I guess, are mounted in a way that the frame has a color. In this case, I had the incredible opportunity to work with Lauren Richmond for the Norton Museum show, and we decided to create a space for the viewer that felt kind of like the experience of the darkroom, which is really hard to share and not very accessible to everybody. Maybe in this room, people have more access to darkrooms. But anyways, so what we did is we chose a color of the walls that made the space really dim, and we spotted the pieces this was very important that they only had one shadow, that the shadow didn't split into a million like diffractions, like the LED lights in the park that are horrible. And that became, the shadow then became also like this material object that was part of the piece, and then the room felt dim. People would walk in, when you walk into a dark space, your whole energy shifts, you slow down, you talk slower, like something, your nervous system relaxes in a way. Well, I think it relaxes. I actually really like the dark. But it does something to you that really slows you down. And then the pieces feel like the light comes from within the work, right? This is also something that a lot of my work is based on the accident and the mistake and chance. There's a lot of push and pull in the darkroom about what we can control and what we hope to get out of it, and then what happens. And sometimes what happens is so much more interesting than what I thought was possible. So there's a lot of mistakes in my studio. Some of them are like beautiful work, and some of them are things that I keep. And I have in the studio, I have a box that I call the box of mistakes. And every time I get lost, I go back to the box of mistakes and I roam through it and I find something interesting like this kind of chemical spill. And I focus on that and I go like, okay, well, we'll start here and we'll see where it takes us. And it's always really interesting, that distance of what I think I could make and then what actually happens, because it's a collaboration with the materials and with the light and with the chemistry and with the objecthood of it. This one in particular is from the Portland show in the Cooley Gallery. And I worked with Stephanie Snyder, and it was an incredible opportunity too. So this one's big. It was like a 40-inch roll of paper, 40 by 50-ish something. And the shadow that it casted was like such an incredible surprise that it extended the piece to the world. What else should I? This is the Norton show. I totally mixed all the images around. So yeah, the work becomes material. The mistakes are part of the practice. idea of using photography and the language of abstraction was also something that started my practice from the beginning. This relationship that photography has to reality, right? Like we reference it, we picture it, we capture it if you want. And some of the verbs that we use to describe the medium are so very violent, like we shoot and we capture and we do all this hunting in the world. And somehow when I started making photograms and started thinking about the contact that the objects have with the materiality of the paper, or in this case where the paper becomes the support and the tool to make the image, there's no objects that I'm using on top of the image. The folds create the space and the light and the shadows and everything. It was as if photography was kind of creating itself from an interior setting, from your perceptual experience of the world, which is kind of how we create reality anyways, right? And so understanding that space of perception, if we can observe our bodies and our experiences of life as something that is a construction, right? Like you were talking about roles, or you were talking about like all of your family history and your role in that family history, or being a woman, or being whoever your multiple selves that you have. In a way, if you understand that's a construction, then you can observe it and modify it and change it, right? And I think art does that for everybody. Like it is a way in which we can imagine new ways of being in the world. In this case, from a very, I don't know, like there's something about presence that the images do to our bodies that like they keep you grounded in your own shoes.
In the present.
Yeah, and in the present moment. There is also this thing about working in the dark that you can't be anywhere else. O sea, you can't be thinking about nothing else but being there. So one of the things that happens is like trying to clear my schedule to actually go into the dark room and like dive deep into this outer world thing that happens there. It might take me days to clear my schedule, and then I do this from 6 days to 2 weeks or whatever it's needed. And it's a very meditative mind space that you have to be in. And sometimes I talk to my friends and they're like, it doesn't sound like the darkroom is a room, right? Like it's not a door you walk into and like you make work. It's a whole experience of it, and you have to be very clear. The other thing that one of you reminded me of was this idea that we are translating, no? Just like our reality right now in this current like very critical moment, but also we're just like a channel that we materialize ideas that the world is ready for, no? That is something that Rick Rubin would say in his book, The Creative Act. So anyways, this work, these little ones are they're 11 by 14. They're a series called Parallelograms. They connect, there's 2 exposures of light filters that create these spaces. They kind of feel like looking through the window of the airplane and seeing the curvature of the earth and seeing this experience of light in a very personal way. Yeah.
No, that's very nice.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fabiola, I have 2 very quick questions.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you mentioned the shadow in your work, because when one thinks about it, the shadow is what indicates 3-dimensional space in our world, and also photographically.
Right.
Would you manipulate the shadow a little bit further? And do you also then need to control how your exhibitions are illuminated?
I control how the exhibitions are lit as much as I can. In the places that I can, actually control it. And then the shadow actually is the thing that makes the highlights in the darkroom. So I'm mostly working with protecting the highlights from being exposed.
But for example, you can manipulate the shadow so that it creates an illusion, that it creates the illusion of more deep space.
Yeah, totally. That is part of it. So, you go.
Do you feel that the framing somehow undermines the 3-dimensionality of your work?
I don't. Some people want them, this is a frame. This is a piece that's in the fair. Some people want them to be out of the frame. Some people feel like the frame is not deep enough. But there is something about each piece kind of gives you the depth that it needs. And while the show at the Cooley Gallery was incredible and that shadow was like incredibly large, these objects are light sensitive, made with chemistry, and they are, ya sabes, como they need glaze. They need 99% UV glass for them to hold light as long as they can in this world. So not doing that was kind of a disservice to the work, and also I cannot make them again. So even when I try. So if something happens to the work, to the physical print, I can't I can't repeat it. So that was more important to me than
The preservation of
the conservation of the work. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
But yeah, one day, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Well,
I also don't like como plexiglass things, like it feels like you can't breathe. So I rather make the frame part of the piece.
It's a little claustrophobic.
To me, yeah.
Yeah.
I have that
sí.
problem too. Yeah. When things behind glass, like when they're closed, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much for coming.
Excellent.
We don't have a lot
okay.
of time. I wanted to ask our panelists one question. I think it has a relationship to what we were just talking about.
Sure.
The name of the panel, of course, is Photography as Sculpture.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure that the work approaches sculpture. I think that the work that you're making is still clinging to the wall. And I don't mean that in any negative sense.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if any of you have any instinct towards leaving the wall, moving into three-dimensional space, and possibly even foregoing the photographic process at some point.
Can I?
It's a big
Can I go
question.
first?
It's a general question. We just have
Yeah.
a few minutes.
So more than the object in the wall, I think the art is in the experience of the work. So for me, I'm more interested in how can I expand your experience of light as a human than if the object is in the ceiling or in the floor or in the middle of the room.
So your instinct might be to create an installation based on light
yeah.
without the photographic materiality.
Yeah, I did one that looked like a dark room. It took a really long time to open your pupil to actually see the work because it was really dark. Like it was 7 pieces that were almost black. But then when people came out of that, they were like, your piece palpitates. And I'm like, that's lovely.
Palpitates.
Yeah, it's lovely, but it's not my piece.
What a great thing for you.
It's your pupil.
Yeah.
As your heart, like you have many pulses, and your pupil also palpitates like the camera when it's trying to focus. But we never quiet enough to listen to those. And so the piece, because it was so dark and it regulated your nervous system down, opened your possibility to listen to that.
Do you know the work of Anthony McCall, who does?
Yes.
Gorgeous.
And Turel and Eliasson. Yeah, all of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron, any thoughts about jumping into the?
I can't project what I'd like to do. I'm having a terribly fun time making what I'm making right now. And also, it's very experimental. Like I'm still fascinated by the way I can storytell, the way I can complicate. I'm going to push back a little bit that it's not sculptural because I think that I've made sculptures that are wall-based sculptures, but I think that any opportunity that any of us has to blur lines between categories, I think it's a fun thing to do. Yeah. So, and a worthwhile and something that we can kind of cultivate something different, better than what we have now. So, a good point. Really, really enjoy the way that my work exists between sculpture, design, I mean graphic design too, and shadows. I couldn't help but to say that, like that, in order for me to convey dimensionality, there's shadows that don't belong in places that occupy my work, just to destabilize the picture plane and complicate what comes forward and what recedes. I also do, and photography is, I think, going to be a baseline because it is how throughout my life, I've been able to process
Right.
my own existence, my history, and it is also a way to, again, as someone that holds the identities of Black and queer, that being able to control my image or my culture's image seems to be, or reclaim, which also, there's this back and forth in my work where I'm borrowing, and I think we can look at this idea of like appropriation and say, is it appropriation when you take something back that you took, and maybe challenge sort of settler colonial notions, right? So I think right now I'm in a very exciting place for me.
Yes.
And
I would agree, by the way.
yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate
the
that.
record, yeah.
And you know, I think also using the space to have these wonderful conversations where we're like, what is that?
Right.
Or I've never seen anything like that before, which I'm sure everybody on this panel has heard many times about our work. And so that keeps the eye and being able to deeply look. So I think with sculpture, we have the opportunity when we're taking these genres and interpreting them in different ways, that it forces a deeper look. So in doing that, we get to do this thing that we don't do so much these days, which is savor. So to be able to savor the surface of something, right, is an exquisite thing. So
That's a beautiful thought, savoring the surface. Yeah. Lou, do you want to?
And like you, I believe if we call it sculpture, it is already a limit. I would be interested that what can we do when photography fusionates or works with other disciplines. Let us, in the future, that things appear and without names. Let's see what we can create, no?
Without names.
Let's leave it open.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. I think that's a great place to conclude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
yes,
Thank you all so much. Yeah.
We made it.